Hello again, Scott Johnson, Data on Rails. This is ActiveRecord Querying Part 2. In the first part of this, we talked about what ActiveRecord is, and just flesh on back to that if you need a refresher. And now we're going to talk about some of the other things you can do with ActiveRecord. And thankfully, this time around, I was actually not freelance. I was not riffing on this. I actually have notes. Not particularly safe notes because I'm driving, but we can do this correctly. All right. So we talked about .all, which gives you everything back to the database. We talked about .order, which orders the results by the column you tell it. So if you want to do ordering by name, ascending, .order, parentheses, quote, name, space, ASC, quote, parentheses. If you want to order by price and get the most expensive products at the top, .order, parentheses, quote, or price, space, DESC, quote, parentheses. All right. Now, if you're an old school database person like me, one of the rules you know is that for better database performance, don't retrieve every column from the database, only retrieve the columns that you need. Okay, so in other words, if all you need to do is edit the name, all you really have to do is retrieve the name and probably actually the ID. Okay? So how would you do that? Well, you can layer in a .select clause. So you can say product .order, parentheses, quote, price, DESC, quote, parentheses, .select, parentheses, quote, ID, comma, name, quote, parentheses. And that would give you a list of products ordered by price descending with simply the ID and the name column. And then that would give you could use those to build like an Ajax form where you edit nothing but the prices. Okay. The default operation in ActiveRecord is to retrieve everything, because ActiveRecord under the hood is what's referred to as an ORM, an object relational mapper. In other words, it treats your database table as an object, and when you're dealing with objects, you want to have all the attributes, aka all the columns. So the default is to give you everything, but you can override it. One of the mistakes people make with ActiveRecord is they think that because it works by default a certain way that it cannot be changed. This is not actually correct. ActiveRecord is a very powerful tool, and you can do a lot with it. Now, I am going to teach you an advanced trick. Let's say, for example, that you were trying to track down a performance problem in your ActiveRecord queries, and you had a particular query being generated, and you could not figure out where in your code base it was coming from, right? So you're tailing your logs, so your Rails application's running slow, and you're tailing your logs, and you can't figure out where this weird query is coming from. One of the things that you can do with ActiveRecord is you can add what's referred to in the industry as instrumentation. And what instrumentation does is instrumentation injects into your running code information that you can use for debugging. And what you would inject in this point is a comment into your SQL queries, and here's how you would do that. You would basically use .select to inject a comment into your application. So you'd say product.all or product.order, whatever, .select, and then you'd put star, you'd put parentheses, quote, /star, Fubarbang, / space, a list of columns, quote, parentheses. Okay. And what that would do is that would put that Fubarbang as a comment in your log file, so that you could actually see, okay, this came from the module Fubarbang. Hopefully you do not have a module named Fubarbang. It is, however, something that it might actually be possible. I hail from the far off in time land of 8.3 naming, where you had 8 characters for the file name and 3 characters for the extension. So sometimes things were named poorly because they could not be named well. And there will be a tale that will be told on a future podcast. All right. So now let's talk about how would you get back only the top 5 most expensive products in your database? This is going to require the use of a new clause, what we call limit, and it's also going to require the use of the order clause. And so this brings up the concept of chaining. So we're going to start with product dot order parentheses quote price DESC quote parentheses dot limit parentheses 5 parentheses. Okay, so the first thing to note is that product.order.limit. That is an example of what's referred to as an active record method chain. In other words, you're able to have multiple of these clauses that are combined into a single one. Okay? An active record under the hood does all that work for you. All right. And the other thing to note is that you can have, I wouldn't want to say an unlimited number of chains, because who the hell knows, right? What actually is unlimited, but I have never found a limit. So you could have a product, a where, you could have the product model, a where clause, an order clause, a limit clause, and a select clause, and they all will play together. And do you have to worry about the order those go in? To my knowledge, no. I have done this in various and sundry different ways. Okay? Active record chaining, it's a thing and it's powerful. And this makes the underlying active record queries, the term for it is what's called composable. Okay. So, wow. In terms of feeling like I live in the future, I have my phone hooked up to my car. I have the GPS running on the car's dash, and I'm recording a video. Wow. This makes me feel like I'm living in a science fiction novel. And yes, as a technologist, it always amazes you when technology actually works well. Okay. So we talked about active record chaining. Okay. We talked about selects. We talked about limits. And in the last podcast, we talked about .find. Now, we are going to next talk about .where, and we're going to give a couple of different examples. All right. So, your where clause, the stuff between the parentheses, okay, that is an expression, okay, and that expression can be written a number of different ways. So, for example, you can have, again, you could have .where parentheses name colon quote cat quote parentheses. Okay. Now, what that will do is that will check your database for any product records that have a name that is equivalent to cat. Okay. And so you might get returned, back a black cat, a white cat, etc., because they're all just in where the white and the color might be in the description. All right, so the next thing you might want to do is say cats with a price of $10. So product.where parentheses name colon quote cat quote parentheses comma space price colon 10.00 parentheses. Now a couple things here. If you notice, I had to put the name in quotes because that's what's called a string literal, and string literals can include spaces, and spaces mess things up for computers, so you can close them in quotes. But numbers are things that don't have spaces and they just work, so I didn't have to put the number in quotes. Okay? And the comma separates the two sections of the query. Now, if you're thinking that underneath the hood, wow, that sounds a lot like what's called a hash, you'd be exactly correct. It is essentially an implicit hash without the hash marks. The hash marks are the squiggles that make it a hash. So basically, when you pass a set of comma delimited arguments to active record, or even actually a single pair of arguments, it's treating them as a hash underneath. This is very useful when you start writing custom functions that build up queries. Okay, so we talked about so can a hash only have 2 elements? Of course not. A hash can have n pairs of elements. Now, could I write that as a standard SQL string? Sure. Product.where, parentheses, quote, cat space equal space, and now you have to put a single quote, or excuse me, let's start that again because I got that wrong. Product.where, parentheses, double quote, name equals quote, cat, quote, double quote, parentheses, okay? Now, what that's doing is that's telling it to search the product model for anything with a name of cat, okay? And you start with double quotes on the outside and you use single quotes on the inside. And you can do it the other way around as well if you were trying to search for names like O'Leary, O''Leary. Okay, in which case you would start with a single quote on the outside and then name equal double quote O' single quote Leary, double quote, parentheses. Okay. Now, if you notice the last couple of examples, I have not specified dot first. Okay? So the thing to understand here is what ActiveRecord returns when you do an operation is ActiveRecord returns what's referred to as an ActiveRecord collection. And this is what it will be referred to as an array-like data structure. So arrays are a thing in computer science. An array is a collection of items that has an order, okay? And you can navigate it, right? You can go from first to second to third to fourth, and so on. It's what's called an iterable data structure. It also has, because this is Ruby, it has a whole bunch of convenience methods. Like you can call dot first to get the first item in the collection, or you could call dot last to get the last item. Or you could say, and now normally these would be bound to variables, right? You wouldn't necessarily be doing it. So it would be like animals equal product.where, parentheses, name colon, quote, cat, quote, parentheses, and then you'd say animals.first or animals.last, or you could even do animals.second or animals.third. Yes, because this is Ruby, and we work hard to make our stuff look like English. And we know it's not, but it makes us feel powerful. Okay. All right, so what else can we do with an ActiveRecord collection? Well, I said this is array-like, and if you know Ruby arrays at all, you could have animals bracket 0 to get the first element in the array, and animals bracket 1 to get the second element. Well, if this ActiveRecord is array-like, and that same bracket 0, bracket 1, bracket 2, that still works. Okay? And you don't need this a lot, but sometimes you do, and when you do, it's there. Okay. I am going to cheat and look at my notes and find the next element to talk about. All right, I've got 2 more things to talk about in terms of ActiveRecord query. So we're going to go a little over our 15-minute mark, and we're just going to make this, and we're going to talk about them. All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, what if you wanted the underlying SQL that made up your ActiveRecord query? Can you get that? And the answer is, as long as you're using Rails, I think it's 4 or later, you can. And the way you do it is you write product.where, parentheses, name colon, quote, cat, quote, parentheses, dot to SQL, to_SQL. That will give you your SQL construct. Okay? Now, as a general rule of thumb in Rails, you don't have to drop back to raw SQL all that often. But sometimes you want to know what the hell's going on with your query. Why is it slow or inefficient? And that's okay. That's a thing, right? That's powerful to know this. So looking at .SQL on your queries, that is a powerful thing. Now the next thing I'm going to say is, what if you wanted to get, for example, all of the names in your of your products? Okay, so you want to build, say, a drop-down list. How would you get just back the names? Okay, so this brings in a little tiny bit of what's called functional programming. Okay, so what would you need for that to function? Well, you would need to have all of the products and their names, and you would want to get them out of that ActiveRecord collections crap, right? Because you don't need the big fancy thing, you just want an array. Well, the way you would do this is you would do product.all.map parentheses ampersand :name parentheses. And we're going to have to talk about this. All right. So product.all, we know what that does. That gives us all products. .map parentheses ampersand :name says effectively iterate over the array that you just got and send the array the :name message. Okay? So when you have ActiveRecord, underlying it is what's called an object relational mapper. And this means that columns in your database are treated as method names in an object-oriented context. So if you have product.first and you send it .name, right, as a method, right? Because when you call .name on something, it's actually internally sending a message to the object saying, give me back the thing that corresponds to name. So product.all.map parentheses ampersand :name. What that does is that sends each row in your table the name message and returns back just that. So the benefit here is you get back an array, because that's what map is designed to do. Map is designed to iterate over a data structure and return another array. And that array is going to have nothing but a list of names. Now, you might say, but it's not ordered correctly. And sure. So the answer is it's not, and you could do this in one of two ways. You could sort it at the database layer, right? Or you could just call the internal sort method on the array. So you could have product.all.map parentheses ampersand :name parentheses .sort. And that could give you a sorted list. Now, if you wanted this sorted by ascending or descending, at this point, that sort operator that's Ruby native, as opposed to ActiveRecord native, doesn't respond to parentheses :name ASC, because you no longer have the knowledge that this is a name column. Right? You can write a Ruby expression that's a sort operator. That's fine. Or you could sort it at the database layer so it becomes product.order parentheses :name ASC parentheses .map parentheses ampersand :name parentheses. Do you like my writing in the air? I hope that makes it better. Okay. And then you would have this list of names. You could do anything you want with. You put it in a column, display it on the screen, put it in a drop-down list, display it on the screen, whatever. All right, so here, let's recap. And I'm going to recap the past two things. So you take the name of your class and you apply to it an ActiveRecord construct like where or order or limit or select, and that gives you back the results of that underlying database query that was generated. You can then compose different queries simply by chaining different methods. You can get the underlying SQL by calling .toSQL on it. And that is at the heart of how you get things back from ActiveRecord. If you want a single element from the database, I strongly urge you to use a .where and then whatever, and then dot first, etc. Mr. Kater. Okay, there's one thing I forgot to tell you about dot where, or 1,000 things, right? But I'll tell you an important one. So we need to talk about what's called an SQL injection attack. This is the first mistake we all make with databases, the first time we program for databases. All right, so you have a web form, and the web form allows someone to put in the name of the animal they want to find, okay? So you've got a Rails controller, we're going to make this RESTful. Rails controller called search, or called searches, okay, because it's pluralized. You've got a new action because it's a new search. You have a form with a single element on it called name. And in the form, and it's also got a submit button. And there's a field there on forms so people can type in cat or bird or zebra or aardvark. Okay? So underneath the hood, that query is going to come in. It's going to be called name. And so you think the right way to do this is do product.where parentheses name colon form field, and that's going to work, okay? Because you're taking the query in. But what if you had product.where parentheses quote name equal quote and then params bracket colon name? So that's how it would be written. So it's a param stack. Is that a good thing? The answer is no. That is a bad thing. And the reason is that you have now rendered your Rails application vulnerable to what's called an SQL injection attack. And the reason is that you did not use what's basically considered a named parameters method. So when you have, and the easiest way to understand this, if you don't understand what I'm talking about in terms of SQL injection, go to Google and search for Little Bobby Tables and find the XKCD comic that explains it, because Randall Munroe, who wrote XKCD, has got an excellent illustration of Little Bobby Tables. Funniest damn thing to a database programmer in the world. So anyway, an SQL injection attack is when someone tries to send something into your database that will be executed. And the canonical example is delete from products. So, because if you understand what you're doing underlying the scenes, you can send in things like delete from products that will be executed during a select context. And that really, really sucks. I have never had this vulnerability in one of my applications, but I have used phpMyAdmin, which used to have this as a known problem. Okay, so the way you get around this is product.where parentheses bracket quote name equals question mark quote comma params bracket colon name bracket parentheses. Okay, and what that is that's what's called a name parameters method, or a positional parameters method, where Rails knows to sanitize and make sure there's no SQL strings embedded inside that inbound name component. Okay? And this is a thing, and this is a real problem, and you need to learn this lesson and not screw it up. Okay? Be really, really careful on the web when you have input that comes in from a form. Anything that comes in from a form should be viewed as this data could come from a malicious user, and he or they or she might be messing with me and trying to delete my crap. Little Bobby Tables, people, it's a thing. All right, thank you so very, very much for listening to this. I will talk to you later.